morning, Willard Wildcats. Happy Thursday, September 10th. We have two birthdays to celebrate today. Happy birthday to Logan K and Isaiah B. We hope you have wonderful birthdays on this Thursday, September 10th. This month in September, we're celebrating being curious and being creative. So today we're going to read a book that celebrates curiosity and creativity. We're also celebrating being inquirers, which means we ask questions of the world around us. So this book called Two Bad Ants by Chris Van Allsburg is a favorite. Mrs. Peterson gave it to me today so that I could read it to you. And I picked it because it talks about creativity. It shows you creativity as you read. So I want to see what you think about this and what questions that you have as we read. Two bad ants. Can you tell where they are? Already, what questions do you have? Do you think that they're at a picnic? Do you think they're in a house? Maybe. The news traveled swiftly through the tunnels of the ant world. A scout had returned with a remarkable discovery, a beautiful sparkling crystal. When the scout presented the crystal to the ant queen, she took a small bite, then quickly ate the entire thing. She deemed it the most delicious food she had ever tasted. Nothing could make her happier than to have more, much more. The ants understood. They were eager to gather more crystals because the queen was the mother of them all. Her happiness made the whole ant nest a happy place. What are those crystals, do you think? Maybe sugar? Maybe. It was late in the day when they departed. Long shadows stretched over the entrance to the ant kingdom. One by one, the insects climbed out, following the scout, who had made it clear there were many crystals where the first had been found, but the journey was long and dangerous. They marched into the woods that surrounded their underground home. Dusk turned to twilight, twilight to night. The path they followed twisted and turned, every bend leading them deeper into the dark forest. Is it a dark forest? What do you think it is? It looks like grass, right? Are they being creative in that the grass looks like a forest to ants? Lots of examples of creativity as we go through this book. More than once, the line of ants stopped, anxiously listening for the sounds of hungry spiders, but all they heard was the call of crickets echoing through the woods like distant thunder. Dew formed on the leaves above. Without warning, huge cold drops fell on the marching ants. A firefly passed overhead. That, for an instant, lit up the woods with a blinding flash of blue-green light. So fireflies have like a little, they have part of their abdomen, part of their body, it lights up. They're really beautiful. At the edge of the forest stood a mountain. The ants looked up and could not see its peak. It seemed to reach right into the heavens, but they did not stop. Up the side, they climbed higher and higher. The wind whistled through the cracks of the mountain's face. The ants could feel its force bending their delicate antennae. Their legs grew weak as they struggled upward. At last, they reached the ledge and crawled through a narrow tunnel. What do you think that narrow tunnel is? What does that look like to you? Bricks on the side of a house? Maybe. When the ants came out of the tunnel, they found themselves in a strange world. Smells they had known all their lives. Smells of dirt and grass and rotting plants had vanished. There was no more wind. Most puzzling of all, it seemed that the sky was gone. They crossed smooth, shiny surfaces, then followed the scout up a glassy, curved wall. They had reached their goal. From the top of the wall, they looked below to a sea of crystals. One by one, the ants climbed down into the sparkling treasure. Where do you think they are? Inside the house? Where do you think the sparkling treasures are? Quickly, they each chose a crystal, then turned to start the journey home. There was something about this unnatural place that made the ants nervous. In fact, they left in such a hurry that one of them noticed the the two small ants who stayed behind. "Why go back?" one asked the other. "This place may not feel like home, but look at these crystals." "You're right," said the other. "We can stay here and eat this tasty treasure every day forever." So the two ants ate crystals after crystal until they were too full to move and fell asleep. They're in the sugar bowl. Daylight came. The sleeping ants were unaware of changes taking place in their newfound home. A giant silver scoop hovered above them, then plunged them deep into the crystals. It shoveled up both ants and carried them high into the air. What is that silver scoop that shoveled them up? Spoon. The ants were wide awake when the scoop turned, dropping them from a frightening height. They tumbled through space in a shower of crystals and fell in a boiling brown lake. What do you think that boiling brown lake is? Coffee. Then the giant scoop stirred violently back and forth. Crushing waves fell over the ants. They paddled hard to keep their tiny heads above water. But the scoop kept spinning the hot brown liquid. What is that scoop? Spoon. It's a spoon. Around and around it went, creating a whirlpool that sucked the ants deeper and deeper. They both held their breath and finally bobbed to the surface, gasping for air and spitting mouthfuls of the terrible, bitter water. Then the lake tilted and began to empty into a cave. The ants could hear the rushing water and felt themselves pulled toward the pitch black hole. Suddenly the cave disappeared and the lake became calm. The ants swam to the shore and found that the lake had steep sides. They hurried down the walls and back to the lake. The frightened insects looked for a place to hide, worried that the giant scoop might shovel them up again. Close by, they found a huge round disc with holes that could neatly hide them. What is that huge round disc with holes that could hide them? Do you see? But as soon as they climbed inside, their hiding place was lifted, tilted and lowered into dark space. When the ants climbed out of the holes, they were surrounded by a strange red glow. It seemed to them that every second the temperature was rising. Where are they? Toaster. It soon became so unbearably hot that they thought they would soon be cooked. But suddenly the disc where they were standing on rocketed upward. The two hot ants went flying through the air. Are they having quite an adventure? Are you wondering what they're going to encounter next? They landed near what seemed to be a fountain, a waterfall pouring from a silver tube. Both ants had a powerful thirst and longed to dip their feverish heads into the refreshing water. They quickly climbed along the tube. As they got closer to the rushing water, the ants felt a cool spray. They tightly gripped the shining surface of the fountain and slowly leaned their heads into the falling stream, but the force of the water was much too strong. You see the faucet? If you were writing this story, what adventure would they have next in the kitchen? Would they have a different adventure in a different part of the house? It would be interesting to read your insert or your page or your part of the book. The tiny insects were pulled off the fountain and plunged down into a wet, dark chamber. They landed on half-eaten fruit and other soggy things. Suddenly, the air was filled with loud, frightening sounds. The chamber began to spin. Do you know where they are now? Maybe a garbage disposal? The ants were caught in a whirling storm of shredded food and stinging rain. Then, just as quickly as it had started, the noise and spinning stopped. Bruised and dizzy, the ants climbed out of the chamber. In daylight, once again, they raced through puddles and up a smooth metal wall. In the distance, they saw something comforting, two long, narrow holes that reminded them of warmth and safety of their old underground home. They climbed into the dark openings. That's not safe, right? That's electricity. But there was no safety inside these holes. A strange force passed through the wet ants. They were stunned senseless and blown out of the holes like bullets from a gun. When they landed in the the tiny insects were too exhausted to go on. They crawled into a dark corner and fell fast asleep. Night had returned when the battered ants awoke to a familiar sound, the footsteps of their fellow insects returning for more crystals. The two ants slipped quietly to the end of the line. They climbed the glassy wall and once again stood amid the treasure. But this time, they each chose a single crystal and followed their friends home. Standing at the edge of their ant hole, the two ants listened to the joyful sounds that came from below. They knew how grateful their mother queen would be when they gave her their crystals. At that moment, the two ants felt happier than they'd ever felt before. This was their home. This was their family. This was where they were meant to be. That was the end. Why was this book called Two Bad Ants? Because they stayed behind, right? They stayed behind. They had an adventure. It was a very creative adventure. So I want you to look around your space and think, where would ants have an adventure in your space? Maybe you don't act it out if it's not sad, but if it's not safe, but think about it and you can write it down. You could even add it or give it as a suggestion to Mr. Van Allsburg, who wrote this book. It's great to expand your thinking in that way, because remember, we're IB students. Wildcats, remember, we are safe, respectful, and responsible. Have a wonderful day.